Now, who doesn't love a total transformation? In this show, we're going to take a look at two key structures out here at the garden home that went from blah to beautiful, all coming up right after this. Over the past 20 years as a garden designer, I've enjoyed helping homeowners create private sanctuaries full of beauty and wonder. I find each garden to be a fresh opportunity to explore ways to create uniquely personal spaces. These are just a few of the gardens I've helped to transform into garden homes. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome to the Garden Home, a show about exterior design, outdoor living, and blurring the lines between inside and out. You know, I just love this landscape. This old farm is really a special place to me. And you know, the support buildings are barns on it. Well, they make it even more special. They serve as important focal points out here in the landscape. From here you can see both the old dairy barn as well as the tractor barn, sitting nicely up there on the hill with a paddock and fence in the foreground. Now, doesn't that set the stage for a nice picture? Now, I have to tell you, this place didn't look like this in the beginning. This old dairy barn was an absolute disaster. In fact, it looked so bad I thought, you know, maybe I ought to just push the thing down. But a friend of mine, who's very big in historic preservation, said, no, I think you ought to try to save it. You know, now I'm glad I did because I think it really looks great. Now, what's interesting about this building, it is a dairy barn. It's small, but it's divided into several rooms. If you look here, this was the feed room. There's a hallway that connects it over here to the milking parlor where the cows were actually milked. And then you have this lean-to that comes off that side of the barn for storing things. And then the other side, the big bay of the barn, well, that provides the most space. Talk about an extreme makeover. If those old cows that used to be milked in here could only see it now. My only hope is it'll last another 100 years. Now, this is the newly renovated feed room of the little dairy barn. What we've done is we've painted it that wonderful comfort green. Now, the only thing that we really modified in this room is the roof height. You see, the room itself is only 12 by 12 and the ceiling height is only 6 feet. So what we did is we raised the center of it to give just more space in here. Now, before we got a hold of it, this room, well, you couldn't even use it. It was absolutely falling apart. So with these modifications, such as the pine walls and the raised ceiling I just mentioned, and then these little barn lanterns that I found, well, it makes it a very enjoyable space to work in. In fact, here is where I bring in some of the finds that I pick up along the way and rework them. Like some of these wrought iron gates. I'm a hopeless collector of lots of things, but particularly garden ornament. And just look at some of this. I mean, this is just fantastic. This is from the 19th century. This is a wrought iron gate. And look at this one with this beautiful shepherd's hook curve here. And then these are some cast iron gate posts. Not sure how I'm going to use them yet, but I'll find a place for them. And what's interesting to me, you think, well, this is an antique from the 19th century. It would be really expensive. The reality is you can find these usually in secondhand stores or antique stores or even junk stores, and they're often not nearly as much as you might think. In fact, I couldn't have these made now for what I paid for them. So it really pays to snoop around a little bit and see what you can come up with. As a matter of fact, the urn that I use in my center fountain garden is one that I found years ago, and it serves as the perfect focal point for that garden room. Now, some projects are just a little too large to fit into that room, like these colossal urns. I found a pair of them in a second-hand store stored at the back. I am thrilled with them because the style and the scale I think is perfect. These are cast iron. Cast iron is a metal alloy made of iron and carbon and silicon, and it was a very popular medium in the 19th century. These urns are solid cast iron, and they'll be placed on their plinths on each side of the house, and I'll fill them with some kind of plant, of course. But what I'm doing now, after we've gone through the process of knocking all of the peeling paint off of them and putting this primer coat, I'm trying a green color that I really like. This is called Roycroft Bottle Green. I wanted something really dark, and I think this is going to fill the bill. Some of it's dried and I can get a sense of what it's going to be, and I think it's going to be perfect. You just never know when you're going to stumble upon a little treasure. Take this mantle, for instance. Last year, a friend of mine called and said, "Hey, I'm at a sale. You won't believe this mantle I just found in the barn." Well, there it was, a beautiful 1820s mantle with Greek Revival details. Just look at this bed mold up here. You can see this flattened ovoid shape, which is very typical of the Greek Revival. This is a vernacular or local craftsman's interpretation of classic Greek Revival form. What's so important about this period, and I suppose really any period, is the form and proportion, whether it's a mantelpiece or molding inside the house or what is applied to the exterior. I think this mantle's in really good shape. There's only a couple of layers of paint on it, believe it or not, and it's made of solid walnut, so it's heavy as lead. Now this is the other barn that was on the property, and it serves really as an equipment or tractor shed. Now when we first got here, it didn't look like that at all. As a matter of fact, it was just this big metal box. It was very utilitarian looking, and I didn't feel like it really fit in with the plans here. So I wanted something that was more historically accurate, something that fit in with the vocabulary of design and color that we're using out here. So what I decided to do is to wrap it. I didn't want to take it down because that was too expensive, and again, we're trying to go as green as possible. So by staying with the same footprint of that building and just putting a different roof line on it and then wrapping it with a locally grown lumber, we achieve those results. Now the reason I chose cypress is that it's a wood that will last a long time, and it's also termite resistant. Then on top of that, we applied many layers of stain, which will enhance its longevity. Now, some other things that we did include the roof. The roof is a standing seam metal roof, which will help it last, well, hopefully for 100 years or so. Now let me show you a couple of details about this barn that I'm really crazy about. The doors, for one. Just look at this, they pull back, and I left the old overhead door in place so we can close that down and then shut these, and it looks authentic. Now, I found some of these wheel and track mechanisms for the doors to roll across, which I was very excited about, and even found some lights that look like an old barn. They're still making these things. During a visit to Savannah, Georgia, I had a chance to visit with Gail Singer, a lighting expert who shared some great tips homeowners should consider when choosing exterior lighting.
When considering lighting for exterior of somebody's home, you would look at two elements. You would look at the functional element and you would look at the aesthetic element. From the aesthetic standpoint, we love to use gas because it's beautiful and it's a low light. It has no functionality at all, but it's just beautiful, and to have a flame in your garden or at the doors of your home. From a functional standpoint, the choice would be something with a higher light level for using for if you have to put your key in the door, so from a safety aspect, walking, being able to walk up steps. Then also there would be ambient lighting in your pathways. They can be decorative in part of your garden. They could also be illuminating whatever plant that you have. As opposed to the interior of your house, which the lighting is much more specific. You're reading and there's a task involved, or you're preparing food in your kitchen, which is going to take very specific light levels. For the exterior, it's really about the functionality of being able to get through your front door and up your stairs, and then really just having it look pretty for your garden.
Well, this is my mobile chicken house, and it's working very well. In a way, you might call it a barn on wheels. Oh, excuse me. All right. The great thing about it is we started with an old trailer that a friend gave me. It's 6 by 16 feet. And with that trailer, we began to build up the chicken house. First went up the walls, then the roof, and then we added these side panels, which you can see are nest boxes all along with hinge doors where I can gather eggs on either side of the chicken house. I call it Egg Mobile Unit 1. And we're getting about, 20 to 30 eggs a day right now. These girls are only 5 months old. We have two breeds. One is a Jersey Giant, black, and then we have some mottled Houdans, which are French. They're the crested ones. Now the idea behind this egg wagon is for me to be able to move it around the fields, and what's great is it has a wire bottom so that all their droppings will fall onto the pasture, fertilize the fields, and at the same time the girls are crawling in the nest boxes and giving us lots of eggs. And these girls seem to be quite happy with the arrangement. They spend all day chasing bugs, laying eggs, eating grass, and engaging in a lot of chicken talk, right, Priscilla? The idea of a barn transcends the American farm. You see, utilitarian spaces like these can be found the world over. From ornate stone structures like this fantastic chicken house at Chatsworth in England, to simple, almost rustic structures like you've seen in my garden home. Jim and Libby Strawn share the love of both travel and gardening. And this couple tells us about the French country-inspired building they created on their property.
Well, when we bought this property, we really wanted a setting that we could have semi-rural and maybe kind of a country French look. And we thought this with the water around us and the space for gardens would be perfect. I've always been fascinated with outbuildings on farm and ranch properties, well, all over the world, but especially older ones that we've seen in Europe and in the south of France. They have a common theme to them. They're more rustic looking, frequently with stone or rough cut timber and lumber. And so we wanted to create a small building that would be practical to be used as a shop or a storage area for tools and outdoor tools, but also would add a visual quality to our property.
And we tried to, Jim wanted it to have a certain architectural appeal, of course, and also the old windows. We went out of state to find those in a wrecking yard somewhere. And then he laid the stone, which I was really proud of you for that. He had never done any stonework, and I laughed because it took probably 10 minutes per stone, so you can imagine how long the whole job took, but it was great. He did a good job.
The stonework, which has texture to it, with the lavender below it and climbing fig vine, gives a soft look and makes it more mature looking. And we actually can enjoy that not from just out here, but when we're on our terrace and you look in this direction, you see that building, the side, as well as the garden boxes in this area.
I was proud of Jim for having the concept of all this and building the boxes.
Where we're standing now, and where the box gardens are, we saw as a, quote, garden area, or like a room. Next to it is some open area with grass, and then our terrace, which was very important because of the view we have out the back across two lakes, and we knew that we would spend a lot of time there, and also it was a great place to entertain. And then on the other side of that, we have a limited amount of space in the back of the house that's right outside our master bedroom.
And we added the bull court at the same time we built the terrace. We had played that in Provence 20 years ago, I guess, and really liked it. It's a game that old people or kids can play, and they play it together. So we added that, and then Jim decided to build the cedar fence and the garden house, so it kind of completed the property across this way.
We spend a lot of time out here together, and many evenings we end the day in the swing under the shed.
Every French friend that we've had, there have probably been 8 or 10 different people from different parts of France. Every time they come out and see the rest of the property, they come out of the house and they say, oh, a country French garden house. And that's exactly the feeling that we wanted.
Okay, I guess officially you wouldn't call this garden shed a barn, but it is definitely a building of utility. And I have to say, I'm very proud of these. They fit in beautifully in the garden down here, and they are extremely handy because we have two of them, one at each end of this very long garden, so we can store tools in both places and not have to just keep walking back and forth to get whatever we need. Now, the great thing about these little stylish tool sheds is that they came as a kit. When they arrived, I decided to cantilever them off our dry stack stone walls. So we built a platform using some large posts, Once the platform was in place, then the building walls went up. The floor went down, the roof joists went up, the siding went up. After that, they shingled the roof, and then we applied some paint to the windows. They have little shutters that go on the windows. The windows are even screened, and they have handsome hardware for the doors. Now, what's great about these is that the size is large enough that you can really enjoy them as a little outdoor room. I'm going to set up one of them as a little garden office, and we're even going to put a wood-burning stove in it. And one last thing, just take a look at all of this space underneath the building. This is going to be a great place for me to store empty garden pots, clay pots, and other things that I use, such as trellises and twigs for using in the garden in the spring. In this show, we've been focusing on barns, but let's pause for a moment and talk about some of the animals that traditionally call these structures home. That's why I wanted to bring you out here to the State Fair to meet an interesting woman named Connie Boger, who came up with this idea of a traveling exhibit called Animal Specialties, which gives kids a one-on-one chance to interact with farm livestock.
Animal Specialties was born because I grew up on a farm and had farm opportunities and animal opportunities that children don't have an opportunity to do today. So we put this on the road as an educational, hands-on experience for children.
What are the kinds of things children learn when they come to your display?
First of all, they get to feel animals, they get to touch, they get to have that farm experience of getting to see how a goat feels or how a cow's udder feels when they get to actually milk the cow, and to know that the milk is really warm when it comes out of the cow. When you walk into our displays, you can see everything from milk cows, dairy cows, beef cows, goats, sheep, donkeys, the poultry part of the industry, the sheep part of the industry, just anything that you might see on the farm.
What's the most popular exhibit?
The most popular exhibit, I would say, would be the hands-on cow milking and the chicken hatching. The kids really get a kick out of being able to milk the cow.
This exhibit isn't just for children. It's for any adult who may have forgotten where the cream comes from for their morning coffee.
Good job, Alan.
Thanks, Connie. Out at the Garden Home Retreat, we've brought in some animals to liven the place up a bit. There are horses and a donkey, and now they're all joined with a small flock of sheep. These are white Dorper sheep, which are very heat tolerant, in that they're not a typical wool variety. These are hair sheep. We have a ram named Zeus, about 25 ewes, a few lambs, and this little cutie, which is the newest resident out here at the Garden Home Retreat. Her name is Eunice. You may be wondering what this guy and all of his friends have to do with gardening. Well, maybe not much, but they are the inspiration for the name of one of my favorite garden plants. This is lamb's ear, and it's easy to see why it's called this. The shape of the leaf looks like a lamb's ear, and it's soft and fuzzy. Now, this is one tough little plant. It's actually a hardy perennial, and this time of year it's beginning to go dormant. It's so tough it can withstand even the coldest New England winter. Lamb's ear is considered an herb because it's one of those useful plants, but it was actually used a lot more in the past than it is today. You see, in colonial times and before, it was used as a bandage because the leaves are fuzzy, they're very absorbent. These days, the plant gets more play as an ornamental. Its silvery gray foliage is the perfect contrast to many flowers and other plants in the garden. If you decide to grow lamb's ear, you'll find that it likes well-drained soils and plenty of sun. Now, some varieties will actually put up a tall spike, and these are ideal for using in autumn flower arrangements. But if you cut the spikes, cut them just before the tiny lavender flowers begin to fade. They just seem to hold up better. The leaves of the plant are also used in very creative ways. This little holiday wreath is made by overlapping them, one on top of the other, like fish scales, and even the bow is made from leaves. Now, it's been accented with globe amaranth to give it a polka-dotted look. To me, it sort of looks like a 1960s pillbox hat. Earlier this year, I had a chance to have a group of international master gardeners out here to the property. As I met with folks, I was especially inspired by some of the dedicated retirees who give their time and service to this organization. Now, if you don't know, you have to go through an extensive training program to become certified as a master gardener. And this group commits to doing many wonderful civic projects. In my community, the master gardeners care for garden spaces around the Art Center, in front of the old State House, and a historic home that's become a visitor center, just to name a few. Bob and Joyce Bumgardner both decided to become master gardeners after they retired. They've transformed their garden into a shady retreat. Bob and Joyce reflect back on how their garden got started and share some of the tips they've learned from their experiences.
Well, we moved here 27 years ago. Joyce especially, even more than me, wanted to make sure that we kept all of the native plants that were already in the yard.
And we really did move the wild ferns from another area, and I planted them in the back even before we moved. We were that excited about getting started.
It's kind of evolved over the years. It didn't just happen overnight.
When we first moved here, you couldn't find really much interest in what we have here now, just greenery. And now I think it's very popular to have this type of garden.
Before I retired, I would come home at night and it'd be like in the summertime 90 degrees and just pull into the carport and walk into the backyard, and it's just like getting into another world. And it's unbelievable when the leaves start falling how many there are. I gather them up and take them up on the driveway and mulch them with my mower. In February, then I put them back down for mulch. And it takes care of our weed problem. Works really well.
The most fun I've had in gardening is with the Japanese maple. It was in just a small container. Was $10. I was able to bring it home and start it. It wasn't any larger than, say, 15 inches. And now, I don't know how tall.
Almost as tall as the house.
It's taller probably than the house. So when you retire, you need something that you're interested in. And Master Gardeners is very, there are a lot of people that enjoy it.
Now, as I've said before, this little dairy barn has been awfully handy. I want to focus on one of the components of it, which is this lean-to. It has been really a great place during the construction of the Garden Home Retreat to set up a place where you can actually sit back and relax and be out of the construction zone. And you can see under here I've got some furniture, some old and some new. Take for instance this table. It came from my city garden. It's teak and it's been allowed to weather a silvery gray. You see, teak is one of the most durable outdoor woods you can use. It's commonly used in garden furniture because it's so rot and weather resistant. These tables are about 15 years old, if you can believe that. Okay, now let's say you don't really like this silvery weathered color. Maybe you like something that's a little newer, like these teak chairs back here. Well, what you'll need to do is give them a wash with some warm soapy water about once a year. And don't be afraid to use a scrubbing brush on them or even a power washer. After they're thoroughly dry, you can sand them just lightly with some sandpaper to smooth off any raised surfaces. And then from a marine store, you can pick up some teak cleaner and a sealer, and you can apply these two items according to the package directions. Now, another way you can keep your teak looking fresh and new like this is each year you can apply some tung oil. That's T-U-N-G oil. And what's great about it is it puts a protective film over the furniture. Now, what you'll want to do each season is you'll want to come in and lightly sand the raised grain that will naturally occur and then apply the oil. And the tung oil will not change the color of the wood like other oils will, such as linseed oil. Well, that's all the time we have for today's show. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have, and I just hope that in the next week you'll take some time to step out and enjoy all that natural beauty around you. Until next time, from the Garden Home, I'm Alan Smith. More information about today's topic and other topics covered in this series can be found at pallansmith.com.
On an upcoming episode of P. Allen Smith's Garden Home.
Welcome to the Garden Home. Welcome is exactly what the next show is all about. We'll start with these grand gates and some of the smaller gates on the property. We'll even see how some of my design clients are using gates in their personal gardens to greet guests with an overwhelming feeling of welcome. Hey, the Garden Gate is always open on the Garden Home, and we hope you'll come in and join us.